The Muslim Empires, Unit 7. Let's review for just a minute. In this unit, we're talking about absolutism, where the government is characterized by a ruler with total or absolute control. The French, the Spanish, the English, and the Russian empires were all characterized by absolutism in the time period that we're discussing, the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Let's begin our discussion of the Muslim empires with the Ottomans, who were located in Turkey, and you can see that area on the map at the right, and eventually spread both down into Western Asia, North Africa, and parts of Europe. The ruler of the Ottoman Empire is known as a sultan or a king, who had an elite guard called janissaries that served and protected him. The sultan was a hereditary position, which means that it passed from father to son, and he lived in a palace in Istanbul, the capital of the empire, in relative isolation. He didn't have a whole lot of interaction with his subjects. His private domain was called his harem, or the sacred place for he and his wives. Ottoman rule. The Ottomans governed conquered areas through local rulers or pashas, whose job it was to collect taxes, keep law and order, and report to the sultan. Mehmet II laid siege and defeated Constantinople, and from that time forward, the city of Constantinople is known as Istanbul, which is what it's called today. The greatest of the Ottoman rulers was Suleiman I, or Suleiman the Magnificent, who oversaw the expansion of territory and influence. The Ottomans also recognized the Sultan's mother as being the Queen Mother, and she served as an advisor to the Sultan while he was on the throne. And the Ottomans created an imperial council, bureaucracy, which helped run the government, and that council was governed by a chief minister known as a Grand Vizier. Government officials were trained in a palace school for officers in Istanbul, which ensured quality and consistency of their performance. Characteristics of Ottoman society. The Ottomans practiced Sunni Islam, so they were Sunni Muslims, and they had an ulama, which was a group of religious advisors who were responsible for making sure that people understood the legal system and education in terms of Islamic law and customs. The society was organized by occupation, with peasants, artisans, merchants, and nomadic herders making up the main groups. They were an ethnically mixed people due to the number of people that had been conquered during territorial expansion. They had a more tolerant attitude toward the rights of women than other Muslim societies of the time, and they were also tolerant of non-Muslims within the empire. Their art featured magnificent architecture in terms of the mosques that they built, and also the creation of beautiful textiles and rugs. Problems with the Ottoman Empire came as Western influences from Europe weakened their cultural identity. Later, Ottoman sultans tried to limit the use of tobacco and coffee, which they found to be very objectionable by their people. The ruler also became less involved with the day-to-day running of the empire and delegated more authority to officials, and over time the training of the officials declined and the government became increasingly corrupt. Let's move on now to the Safavid Empire, which is centered in Persia, as you see on the map, or in modern-day Iran. The ruler of the Safavid Empire was known as a Shah, which is also a word for king, and the Shah was recognized as a spiritual leader of Islam, just like the Ottoman Sultan would have been by his people. The Shah was more available to his people and to visitors to the empire than the sultans of the Ottoman Empire were. In some cases, the image of the Shah was engraved inside the drinking cups to be visible and known by his subjects. The Safavids also had a system to train their government officials, and they strengthened their army with the latest weapons. There's an emphasis in the Safavid Empire on Shia Islam, or a more traditional and orthodox practice. It limited the rights of women and used the Shiite faith as a way to unify people within the empire. The social structure was ethnically mixed due to the conquering of people in order to build the empire. The Safavids traded goods with other locations and within their own empire by horse and camel caravans, but far-reaching trade was difficult because they didn't have reliable access to the sea and because they were surrounded by other strong empires. They had a superior knowledge of scientific, medical, and mathematical practices. Their architecture featured palaces, mosques, and bazaars, and their artwork featured metalwork, tiles, and glasswork in the form of mosaics, as well as silk weaving and carpet making. Finally, let's move on to the Mughal Empire, which was founded by Babar from the region of the Indus River Valley and spread into the Indian subcontinent. The Mughals conquered the Indian subcontinent or peninsula by military force. The empire was really more a collection of semi-independent states held together by an emperor than one strong government entity. Babar was succeeded by Akbar, his son, who was known for his humane rule. The Mughals were also Muslim, but religiously tolerant, and their empire included populations of Hindus and Christians as well. In fact, Babar even took a Hindu princess as one of his wives to emphasize religious toleration. The Mughals gave land to local officials who were called zamindars, who kept some of the taxes that were paid by peasants instead of drawing a salary from the Mughal government. The remaining taxes that were paid by the peasants were given to the emperor, and this usually totaled about a third of a yearly harvest. The Mughals practiced foreign trade and exported textiles, tropical fruits, and precious stones in exchange for gold and silver. They had a mixed role for women. Women had some very specific freedoms in this empire, but they were also limited in terms of their interactions. And in some cases, the women were separated from the men culturally, and the Mughals practiced child marriage, or the offering of young girls for marriage. They blended Persian and Indian styles of art and architecture, and probably their most famous architectural example is the Taj Mahal, which is pictured below. Problems with the Mughal Empire. The empire expanded but also weakened after Akbar's death, and you can see its extent in the map at the right. Finances were limited and taxes were raised, which left many of its subjects in poverty. Also, after Akbar's death, stricter Muslim rule was implemented and eventually included the persecution of the Hindus. And by the 1600s, the British had arrived in India to establish trading forts and would eventually rule India as a colony. This is the conclusion of our video on the Muslim empires in the age of absolutism. If you need to rewind or rewatch any portion of the video, please feel free to do so. Thanks for listening.